Welcome back to news, everybody. So today we've got a fascinating story that really comes in two parts. One of them is of a studio trying to protect itself as it gets acquired, in this case by Activision Blizzard, their story of trying to protect themselves, and then a recent law that has forced companies in California to actually disclose pay ranges for roles, which then is interesting because we can compare Blizzard to Riot to whatever, basically, and that's going to allow us to understand really a hell of a lot more. And as we go into this, I'd say, if you're at a union, say yes or no down in the comments and let us know, has it been a positive or negative experience? How has it actually worked out for you? While you're down there, hit the like button because now the algorithm uses sentiment as well, so truly would help.
It's about time, to be honest.
Our key facts then, right? So Proletariat, that basically is a studio that was acquired by Activision Blizzard because they needed more World of Warcraft developers. And they were responsible for, I think, 100 people odd.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, being added to the credits of the most recent expansion. So Proletariat are now actually the third studio to begin the process of unionization. But they actually have a supermajority, which is 57 workers in total. And it's not just QA, because the other ones we've talked about, they've just been QA. This time it is engineers, designers, producers, QA, animators. It really is across the board. And they are going to be joining, they hope anyway, the Communication Workers of America, which is the same body that the QA staff from Raven and Blizzard Albany joined. So overall, it's them, I mean, really, like, in I think a larger, more together way, trying to protect themselves, because in the past, it was QA, which does play into this almost, because it's fun to make things exist within the Imperium of Man. Like, you know, QA, yeah, you can advance out of QA, but it's in a little bit of a, you know, just... You're going to be, it's a meat grinder that's not particularly well compensated.
Yeah, and that's the danger with getting Proletariat is like one big group. That's one big group together. They absorb the whole big group together, and they're obviously going to stick together and go through this more as a cohesive unit than just, the QA, because Blizzard would obviously like to play QA off against different kinds of people, because they always can say, the QA, they're one of the problems here, aren't they? Oh, they're the issues. But for Proletariat, you couldn't do that, because they're together.
It's weird because you would think, right, at least my perspective in this would be that you'd far rather have, and I know this might seem extremely naive, but the whole company be together rather than basically creating more of a rigid class structure within the company, which surely is going to lead to a lot of disharmony and probably bad employee outcomes over the long term.
You would think that, but I think as we're all very aware, Activision Blizzard have not been very good at thinking with the long term for the entire time we've known them effectively as one unit.
Yeah.
It's always been, and this is like a story of the games industry as a whole, largely it's been short term, or like at, I guess, the longest medium term, and we've seen how that's gone wrong. So at least this is kind of going, okay, well, these people are going to work for their own long-term safety, and hopefully that actually kind of improves things going forward.
Yeah. To do a quick TLDR of what they're asking for, basically flexible paid time off policy, remote work as a permanent option, robust healthcare, basically more transparency over like, you know, compensation and that kind of thing, overtime never being mandatory, refusing to do overtime not impacting a performance evaluation, and then the voluntary overtime having better pay and health protections, just more transparent processes, more focus on like, you know, culture and stuff like that. So broadly speaking, it's them just wanting to protect themselves and have a union mediated way of, I guess, collectively bargaining for, for a better outcome. The downside to that is you have to do it through a union, which means it can be a bit slower. But the upside is you're stronger together. In a world where Activision Blizzard, like, were really putting their employees first, it's one of those things where it's like, ostensibly, you wouldn't need a union because you could just do it more efficiently with us, which is the line that Activision Blizzard will use against the union. But ultimately, we kind of know that they're not particularly to be trusted, unfortunately, and a lot of the staff at Proletariat definitely think that when we go into their reasoning for doing this. And I guess what's kind of more impactful with this one is it's a supermajority within the entire studio, right? It's not like it's not like those other situations where there potentially could have been more roadblocks, but like with having the supermajority, ABK probably can't use some of the same like stalling techniques that they've done in the past, which at the very least means I think we have a higher chance of this really happening. And then when it does happen, being more efficacious because people aren't being played against each other, and it's not really going to be causing as much of a class thing. I mean, if it's 57 people, then yeah, there's like, I don't know, 40 odd people who are not there, or 30, whatever. But I mean, it's certainly more unity than we've seen in other places. And perhaps when the union goes through, more people will feel, okay, now I can actually join the union.
Yeah, especially when it comes across the whole like wider studio as a whole. There may be some slight disagreement within, but there's no way to like split them up nicely and go, oh well, like we're saying, like, oh well, it's the QA want this, but you don't want this, engineers, because you're just fine as you are. Why would you let these people try to get the better of you? This time's like, yeah, we're a cohesive unit. We made the vote. Sure, not all of us agree, but there's no way to like segregate them there. It just works.
Yeah, I think that's a company culture where somebody in QA is going to at least feel like they can maybe progress more, or they'll be treated better, or like they're in the same boat as the engineering people. I know a lot of devs will feel that. I've heard mixed things. You have a lot of devs on Twitter being like, oh, QA, we need you, you're the best. But then I've certainly, and I think you have as well, heard people say, oh no, we're a different class. We're not treated as well as them.
Yeah, I guess that's where like Proletariat being a small studio to begin with comes together, where they would probably be a little bit more like, I guess, how a small company kind of grows, where they're all in the same room, they're all the same people, the same group of like, not necessarily friends necessarily, but they likely know each other very well from starting small and adding QAs like 1 or 2 at a time, and then it gets to 100, and that's still enough to be like, oh yeah, we all know each other, we're all part of this, we're all the same in group. Whereas if you have QA, especially if you have QA in different floors and different buildings, as Activision Blizzard do.
The Treyarch story.
The Treyarch story, yeah. With that not going on, you could see it working better.
Yeah, like some of the Treyarch story was the idea that like, oh hey, there's a bunch of overtime, so some food's being brought in. QA people? Oh no, you get the leftovers from the real developers. And that obviously makes people feel horrible. There's also a very obvious joke that we haven't made about the company being called Proletariat, but to move on, you may be thinking, have things not got better at ABK? In short, from what I understand, no in some ways, yes in quite a few ways. Yeah. There were good things for QA. We saw temporary people being turned into full-time with some pay increases, which is good. But here we want to hear what this developer actually has to say. And here's what they've said. Everyone in the video game industry knows Activision Blizzard's reputation for creating a hostile work environment. So when we heard Blizzard was planning to acquire us, we started to discuss how we could protect the great culture we have created here, says Dustin Yost, who is a senior engineer at the company. By forming a union negotiating contract, we can make sure we are able to continue doing our best work. So essentially it is a bit of self-preservation. And I think when we look at the stories from Blizzard Albany, in that recent report into Diablo 4 that we covered, well, Blizzard Albany doesn't have the best morale. Like, as Vicarious Visions, they had their legacy, they had their history, but, one day it's like your company mug at work has, it no longer says Vicarious Visions, now it says Blizzard, and yeah, you always worked for Bobby Kotick because they were an Activision Blizzard studio, but it's just going to feel worse.
Yeah,
given that quite a lot of the bad stories were coming from Blizzard. Jen O'Neill was made co-leader of Blizzard, but then wasn't really treated fairly, and whatever happened, she ended up leaving. So their leader, who had risen up the ranks from being a QA tester in that company to leading them, she gets the boot. So I think you also have to remember, developers talk to each other. There's a very common term in the industry called friend EA, which basically is you do often talk about stuff with your mates, but you maybe will have to hold the juiciest things, but you'll give people the gist, which is why, when I think of this, there's absolutely people working at Proletariat that will have had friends at Blizzard Albany who would have, they would have been talking. Basically, it is a small world. It's not the biggest industry in the world, and talk really, really does spread.
Yeah, I imagine like Proletariat went in there with the shields raised. They know where they're going, so they're going to be this like one protected like company in numerous meetings going into this, going, okay, we know what to expect, we know what to not let happen. And that's why I imagine they don't internally consider themselves like Blizzard Boston. I don't know, maybe the name will happen if they do set them up like that way. But I imagine they're all sat there with their Proletariat stuff going, yeah, we're obviously the the name works so well for that Proletariat, but I imagine they consider themselves Proletariat first, and that'll continue. Whereas, like you say, with the mugs at Vicarious Visions now saying Blizzard Albany, technically or theoretically, whenever anything's shipped in, you're going to run into some of those like, oh, we've lost who we are because of the power of a name. It
Yes.
like means so much. I imagine they'll hold on to that really strong. And that should mean that ultimately they should be able to do better work. And even if there's maybe a little bit of, but I guess it's the thing where if they're working in World of Warcraft, they'll likely be happy enough with the World of Warcraft team. Because as we've talked about before and as we've seen sort of evidence of, Blizzard and the individual sub-teams aren't the same thing. There are elements of Activision Blizzard management that the World of Warcraft team will like disagree with. So I imagine you'll be able to work well on that game with that team as friends, but also have their shields up against Blizzard management overall.
As well, working in World of Warcraft, knowing where that game has been, and now knowing that it is genuinely on a far more positive trajectory, I think they're also going to know their value. And speaking of value, we do have California's Pay Transparency Act, which means that all employers with more than 15 employees must display a role's wage, hourly or salaried, without any additional compensation like bonuses. Basically, that has to be on every job listing. Obviously, this will impact all the major games companies who do have a base in California. But what we are instead seeing is pay ranges. With whatever the kind of wording of the law is, pay ranges are an acceptable thing, which, there are mostly cons there, but there are also some things that are just realistic, right? Because not everybody's going to be paid the exact same money. Having a ballpark is definitely good. At least people can look at the lowest number, and if they're happy with that, then maybe that's the move they're going to make. And as we're soon going to find out, that's not going to be good for Blizzard. Now, with the pay ranges, though, sometimes people can devalue themselves. Sometimes they will take less money to take the opportunity that they are more interested in emotionally. And, sometimes that, you could say is exploiting passion. There are other times where maybe the economics of that business just means that's what they are offering. But also what they're offering is the work that you'll be doing. And if that's work that you would rather do, well, then you have to think about things in a more sort of holistic way for your life. There's also some stuff with like waiting. The upper pay range can be massively dragged up by a single employee when you have lots of employees who are nowhere near the upper pay range. So maybe people could say that a range plus a median within a title, maybe that is what would be a little bit better. But what we want to do is take a look at Activision Blizzard, and because QA has been such the talk of the town, I really think we should go to that. So we're going to go to Kevin O'Brien here. He works for Theorycraft Games. They're a new startup. Per their Crunchbase, they've raised $87.5 million, so they obviously have big aspirations. Now, he was a former Riot employee, and looking at these, Riot pays the most, then Bungie, then Blizzard.
Not a surprise.
Yeah, saying that roughly matches what he's heard over the years talking to people, but seeing Blizzard's levels be so much lower is still shocking. So I think it's time to take a look at these. And it's not just the amount of money, but we will do the amount of money first. So, Riot Games. This is for a QA Engineer 2. You're getting 94 to 132 grand. For Test Lead Destiny, you're getting 86k to 108k. And for Blizzard, being a test lead on Diablo 4. So at least like looking here, test lead versus test lead. For Blizzard, $49,600 to $91,760. Yep. Now, that means that Blizzard's the lowest end of their pay band, which would be the starting wage, we could assume, is a rather delicious almost half of what Bungie will be starting you off at for the same job title.
Yeah, because QA Engineer 2 for Riot is effectively test lead. It's like similar responsibilities. So that is just like, it's half. That's almost as low as half for the starting. And like, obviously it goes up there a little bit. The Bungie and Blizzard topper, only it'll be like 20% difference. That's kind of crazy when you're thinking about that kind of money. And then even Riot offering like a whole 40 grand more at the higher end of that is... You wonder why you wonder why Riot Games largely ship less buggy and Blizzard's games ship a little bit more. I wonder.
Yeah, and I guess Riot, they've been very focused at doing a smaller number of things excellently. But it is just interesting. Like straight up, that is not enough money to get by properly in that region of the world. And again, that's the bit that we've got to be very clear on. From what I understand, California has a cost of living, especially when you're in around places like Irvine. It has a cost of living that is completely like maybe you could think about Dublin with what big tech has done to rent prices in Dublin.
Destroyed it.
Yeah, so like Dublin's been kind of destroyed as a city. London obviously has those really big prices. Comparing, say, Belfast to London or Belfast to Dublin, like it's so much cheaper for us to work here or just in Northern Ireland, I guess.
For now.
For now. But I guess like these are amounts of money that for anyone where we're living would be friggin' awesome.
Yeah.
Especially with the current exchange rate. But the point is, in California, everything is crazy expensive.
Yeah, between taxes and your like $2.5 to $3,000 rent in LA, like it is just your money is going away. It's going away very fast. I mean, all the stories we hear about like Blizzard employees, because obviously their pay's allegedly gone up a little bit, and people have said it's gone up in the past while. But even then, you look at that kind of pay and you go, oh yeah, I can see why people are like sharing apartments with like 6 people, because that's the only way they could feasibly live. And that's after like Californian taxes and stuff as well, because that's pretty bad, especially when you get up into that 6-figure range. A lot of that'll be gone too.
Yeah. Now, of course, there are other perks. There are perks that, that come with all of these different companies. But broadly speaking, Blizzard are really coming out quite poorly. That's rough. Now, all of these do have roughly equivalent benefit packages, which does include health. They all do make a mention of discretionary rewards, so bonuses, right? So that's all there. Now, the thing with a bonus is, those can be good. Those can also be less good as a practice. I think you actually found some research about bonuses not being particularly good for productivity.
Yeah, bonuses, basically financial rewards like bonuses aren't very good for intrinsic motivation. They're obviously people are intrinsically motivated to do their job anyway, because you do the job to live, etc. But bonuses kind of take away from that a little bit when it's financial. There's some element of positive feedback is good, but generally speaking, you don't want to go, you did a good job, here's more money now, because it has that other impact of you don't get money the other time, especially when you look at Blizzard and they're like, hey, we pay bonuses based on how much our games are making, all the big money. We haven't released any games, so none of you get bonuses. Sorry about that. And that's the whole thing about them consistently saying, like over the last couple of years, of the good times is around the corner, and that includes the employee bonuses. You're not getting paid much now, but when our games release, you'll get the money. But that'll be, that doesn't matter until you get the money if you're poor now.
Yeah, it's one of those tricky things. It's obviously different in like indie and other sectors where that can make a hell of a lot more sense just because of like the scale of business. But when you're looking at like these large multi-billion multinationals, you kind of do expect that you're going to be seeing an increase in like stability. So rather than having to lean in bonuses, it's like having a better promotional ladder that will make people feel like, it's not just that I've been given a wad of cash, I've actually been promoted. I think there's probably more like, I don't know, not to use holistic as one of those, fuzzy words that doesn't mean much. It's probably better ways to reward and incentivize people.
Generally think so. But there is one other small thing that we noticed going through these, and that is that Blizzard actually demands a little bit more, at least according to the responsibilities. It could be different once you're actually in there, based on the job listing. But it basically says, you have to like recruit and manage this team. Obviously, a team lead is going to lead the team anyway. But it's so much more focused on doing the things that you would imagine like HR does. So they've got lead, recruit, coach, and manage a small team towards individual and team excellence. And the idea of like, okay, well, you're the team lead, right? So you're going to be given, say, as an example, one of your team members is giving you work saying, is this, say, this prototype game mechanic, is this good enough? Or for the QA example is, hey, here's all of the results we have from these unit tests. Run through them. Give me, you're the lead. Give me some feedback on how I could present this better to our software engineers or whatever else. And then we can improve as a team. But then that person's going, sorry, I'm actually currently going to spend the next 6 weeks looking at job interviews for other QA to join you. Where you feel like that should be kind of something handled elsewhere by people who are more specialized at that. Obviously, there's some argument to be made for recruiting is probably a good thing for a team lead to be able to do. But it's notably pretty absent in the other two. So it seems like the actual organizational structure is more that you don't have to do that for the other companies. So does that mean you have to do more work for a lot less pay? Does that mean you have to have a different set of specialities on top of that? But you're also getting paid less for it comparatively? Yeah. And you can just kind of see how all of these little bits and bobs add up to why would you work for Blizzard? And then the answer is, well, you either love Blizzard to death, which means you're going to be really, I imagine you don't now, but you're going to be more, I guess, driven to being exploited for your passion. Or you're only going to work there if you can't work at Riot or Bungie, which means Blizzard aren't going to get the pick of the litter. Riot will, because they're the ones offering more money. And then you can see how that happened over years. And now we're kind of where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, that is really it. That is mostly the story. It just seems that Blizzard are not paying what they should for some of these roles. Now, maybe Blizzard are going to be paying more for like roles, say, on the unannounced survival game. You know, if they want a principal artist, right? But QA is obviously really important. So many games, like we did a video just basically about sheer exasperation at the launch state of so many games these days. And I think you then just see, oh, cool. A Diablo 4 lead test person is on like almost half of what they would get if they were working at Bungie. And that just makes you think like, you know, is that going to select the best people for those jobs? Is that going to be in the long-term interest of the players? I really think not. It does feel kind of unnecessary given the scale of the company. Like I'm very much pro being lean, like absolutely. But this just seems like they're going to be outcompeted.
Yeah,
that's really it.
Yeah, it's fine to like pay someone what they're willing to accept and not a whole pile more, but you have to also make use of your money to pay them to get them into the company in the first place. It's like, there's a difference between being lean, being 0% body fat and being dead, but being like a nice 15% and being strong too. It's a bit of a difference there.
Yeah. So that's basically it. That's the situation. If you'd like to check out, though, our summation of the big, very annoying problem that's going on, then you can check out our video on just our general exasperation at games. And if you want a nice big series to sink your teeth into, we do have the Worst Publisher 2022 awards, which are currently ongoing, and there's plenty of episodes up on the channel. That's it for us, though, so see you next time.